So I will call our City Council meeting to order of March 22nd, 2022, being held virtually via WebEx. The first item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. If everyone is able to, please turn on your camera and unmute yourself and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the
flag of the United States of America,
and
to the republic
which
it stands,
one nation, under God,
God,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. The next item is the open forum. So I will pass it to our Executive Assistant, Kelly Wynn, to let people know how they can participate in the open forum and to let us know if anyone is on the line to participate in the open forum.
Thank you, Mayor. Of course, we always encourage residents to participate in our open forums. This is the chance for council to hear your comments. You can call now at 612-861-0651. You can also have your comments read by a staff person, and you can email those ahead of time by 2 p.m. on Tuesdays before council meetings to kwyn@richfieldmn.gov. You can also call and leave a message at 612-861-9711, and those comments can also be read by a staff person. Again, if you'd like to participate now during the meeting, you can call 612-861-0651. And I do have one person on the line if you give me just a moment. Katie, are you there? Katie, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
We can. If you could briefly state your name and your address, please, and then you have up to 3 minutes to address the council, and we won't respond because it's not a conversation, but it's just a moment for you to share whatever you'd like to share with the council.
Great, thank you. My name is Katie Shepard. My address is 7301 17th Avenue South in Richfield. I am a member of Richfield for Equitable Public Safety, or REPS, a growing and multicultural group of Richfield residents who want to ensure that all residents feel safe, respected, and valued in the community. First, I want to express my gratitude for the time that each of you spent meeting with our group over the past year. Thank you for listening to our concern related to the racial disparities that appeared in the Richfield Public Safety Department's arrest data, which we received through a Data Privacy Act request, and in our analysis of the department's use of force data, which is available on the city's website. Second, I want to share some input from reps that we hope you will consider as you complete the new strategic plan. To give some context, our group focused on traffic arrests in Richfield because driving is a common, although not universal, activity across Richfield and metro area residents. The Richfield traffic arrest data that we reviewed showed that Black individuals were arrested at a rate 2.5 times their portion of the Richfield population. This racial disparity in traffic arrests is concerning because evidence shows that traffic stops can lead to excessive force or even death. An October 2021 New York Times investigation into deadly police traffic stops notes that traffic stops are the most common interactions between police officers and the public. The investigation attributes the quick escalation during the traffic stops to police training that overstates the danger of traffic stops, which then stokes the fears of the officers. We ask that in your strategic planning process, you set goals and strategies that will diminish racial bias and discrimination in our city. We hope that there will be a combination of HR policies and training that will ensure that these measurements improve so that Richfield can be the community where people of all races, ethnicities, and backgrounds feel welcome, safe, and valued, as the city's commitment to racial equity states. Moreover, we ask that the council regularly review this data to allow you to respond based on whether the city's efforts are achieving the goals and outcomes that we hope you find as important as we do. Last, we hope that the new strategic plan will include an approach that welcomes regular, authentic community conversations related to the Public Safety Department's impact in the community. We hope that community voice will be valued and heard and not seen as a burden or an inconvenience, which is how reps has felt recently as we continue to wait for meeting dates with city staff regarding the racial disparities in the data and how the city plans to respond to changing these outcomes in the future. We want to work in partnership with the City Council and city staff to build a more inclusive Richfield, but we also expect that our city leaders will do the hard work, engage in difficult conversations, hold staff accountable, and take our concerns seriously. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for your comments, Katie.
Thanks, bye.
Executive Assistant Wynn, do we have anyone else on the line for the public forum or the open forum, excuse me?
I do not have anybody else on the line.
Okay, we will just wait a minute or so. And then I was looking online to see, could you just remind folks, since while we're waiting for anyone on the open forum, when we will be returning to in-person meetings? Is that at the beginning of April? Starting April, we'll be back in the City Council chambers for our meetings?
April 1st, we'll go back to public meetings. So our first council meeting back in the chambers will be April 12th.
Okay, thank you.
And residents can also, if you don't feel comfortable attending in person to those council meetings, these open forums will continue where you can call in. So you can dial that 612-861-0651 number during our council meetings. And you can also submit your comments via email before the meetings as well. And we can continue to read those during council meetings.
Thank you.
I do have someone calling in.
Okay.
You can go ahead with your comments.
Good evening. My name is Andrea Solano, and I am a resident at 7225 Harriet Avenue. And I am calling this evening because our neighbors are very concerned about the house on 7212 Harriet Avenue. It is a house that has become a location where there are people coming in and out. There is obvious use of drugs, and we have the police constantly coming by. And our concern is that there are many children on the block, as well as we are right within a block of the high school and the early childhood center. And it concerns us that I know that the city is doing as much as they can, but I think we need to become a little bit more creative, because about a week ago, we had an incident where a tactical team had to respond and the block was completely blocked off. A message had to be sent to Richfield Public School students and their families because of the amount of police present, because there was a man with a large knife that was threatening the people within the house. And it is concerning because as a mother of two children, I would like to be able to go out into my front yard and play, but it is a concern that we just don't know how volatile the situation can become at any moment. We've also had several residents of the block make comments that they would like to move out of Richfield because of the situation. And I think that it would be a shame to lose tax-paying residents to a situation like this when we need to come up with a more creative solution. so that we are able to have a safe environment, not only for the people on the block, but also for the large amount of students that walk by our neighborhood. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much for calling in and sharing your comments.
Thank you.
Mayor, I do have another caller.
Great, thank you for patching them through.
Okay, you can go ahead with your comments.
Hi, my name is Ariel Thomas. I live at 6424 Humboldt Avenue, South in Richfield. I am a first grade teacher at Partnership Academy, and I'm also a mother of 2 4-year-old twins. And I just wanted to call in and support the Partnership Academy expansion. Partnership Academy is the only school in Richfield and one of the only schools in the Twin Cities that offers fully funded, like no pay pre-K for the whole day. And as I'm trying to cobble together pre-K options next year for my own 2 kids, and they're going to go to the dual language immersion school, and it's only 2 hours. So having to figure out a nanny or if they're going to daycare, and it's just such a struggle. And I know so many families feel that. And Partnership Academy, it's such an important part of the community. It needs to be expanded. There's so many students there. More families want to come. I know in my class, I have a student and he comes in every day from Farmington, and the family is working on moving to Richfield so that way they can send all 3 of their kids to Partnership Academy. I know that we expanded to middle school because students didn't want to leave and there weren't that many middle school options. And we need the space. There's just so many kids. We want to provide more services, more pull-out spaces, have 2 pre-K classrooms, and it's just such a need to expand. And so please, please, please support the expansion for Partnership Academy. The students need it, the teachers, everyone. It would just be such an important part of the Richfield community. Thank you.
Thank you for calling in and for your comments.
I do not have anybody else on the line, but I know that Management Analyst Swanson has some comments to read as well.
Okay.
All right, Mayor and Council, we received quite an outpouring from the community about the Partnership Academy proposal. So what I'm going to do is just read 2 comments that kind of generalize, one from the teacher side and one from the parent side that we've heard. I think we got over 50 comments in the last week, so quite a number of responses. First one's from
Sorry, I was just going to interrupt. I'm wondering, since it is written and we do have it on the council agenda, if we can just hold it for that part. Is that fine?
I think whatever you want.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Yep. So I think since we have it on the agenda, since it is on the agenda for item, let's see here. Sorry. Oh, I'm looking at the consent calendar. Item number 5, and if it is for that item, then let's hold those comments and read them when we get to that item. Councilmember Whalen?
I would be open to that. I don't have strong feelings, but I also know we've discussed in the past not setting the precedent of turning every item into a public hearing. So I guess I would, it to me does not feel inappropriate to hear them now, but I'm curious if others have strong feelings one way or the other.
Any opinions from council? Councilmember Hayford O'Leary.
I believe Mr. Swanson plans to read just kind of a summary, not each of the comments individually. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I guess my preference would be to hear them at maybe after we read the staff report during that item. Although I see the City Attorney has just popped on, so if she has anything to add.
Mayor and council, all I wanted to add was to address Councilmember Whalen's concern is that it doesn't turn it into a public hearing. It's fine to go ahead and just read the comments along with the agenda item without opening it. You don't need to open it formally as a public hearing. That's the only thing I wanted to clarify.
Great, thank you. Then let's add it to the agenda item then. Thank you. Executive Assistant Wynn, are there any other folks here for the public hearing or for the, oh my gosh, sorry, the open forum?
I do not have anybody else on the line.
All right. Well, seeing as we have nobody here for the open forum, I will close the open forum and then we'll move to our next item on our agenda. And that's the approval of the minutes of the special city council work session for March 7th, 2022, the joint council HRA and planning commission work session of March 8th, 2022, the regular city council meeting of March 8th, 2022, and the special city council work session of March 15th, 2022.
Councilmember Supple, move approval of the minutes.
Councilmember Hayford O'Leary, second.
Thank you. The minutes have been, the motion has been made to approve the minutes by Councilmember Supple and seconded by Councilmember Hayford O'Leary. Any comments, questions on the minutes? All right, City Clerk Sinning, could you please take the roll call vote?
Mayor Bacon-Gonzalez?
Aye.
Wow, why can't I think? I wanted to say Chair Supple, but that's not incorrect. Wow, Councilmember Supple.
Aye.
Councilmember Chapman?
Aye.
Councilmember Hayford O'Leary?
Aye.
Councilmember Whalen?
Aye.
Thank you. We have 5 ayes and the minutes have been approved. The next item is the approval of the agenda.
I'd move the approval of the agenda.
Whalen, I'll second.
Councilmember Troutman made the motion to move the agenda and it was seconded by Councilmember Whalen. City Clerk Sinning, could you please take the roll call vote?
Mayor Bacon-Gonzalez?
Aye.
Councilmember Supple?
Aye.
Councilmember Chapman?
Aye.
Councilmember Hayford O'Leary?
Aye.
Councilmember Whalen?
Aye.
Thank you. We have 5 ayes and the agenda has been approved. The next item is a consent calendar with City Manager Katie Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor. The consent calendar contains several separate items which are acted upon by the City Council in one motion. Once the consent calendar has been approved, the individual items and recommended actions have also been approved. No further council action on these items is necessary. On tonight's consent calendar, item A, consider a resolution approving a request for a conditional use permit to allow Class 3 restaurant, fast food convenience restaurant at 466th Street East, Richfield Shops. Item B, consider the approval of a bid tabulation and award of contract to Park Construction Company for the 2022 concrete and mill and overlay project in the amount of $320,771.38 and authorize the city manager to approve contract changes under $175,000 without further city council consideration. Item C, consider a resolution of support for the development of affordable supportive housing with the lowest incomes on the property located at 6613 to 6625 Portland Avenue. Item D, consider the first reading of a transitory ordinance providing funding for certain capital improvements from the Liquor Contribution Special Revenue Fund. Item E, consider approval of a service level agreement with Dialogue One LLC for translation and interpretation services. Item F, consider the approval of both a sidewalk and utility easement and a temporary construction easement at Nicollet Avenue and 70th Street with Hennepin County so intersection upgrades can be completed. Item G, consider City Coalition letter commenting on Xcel Energy's 2020 to 2031 integrated distribution plan. And I submit all of these items for your consideration as part of the consent calendar tonight.
Whalen, I'll move to approve the consent calendar.
Supple, I'll second.
Thank you. The motion has been made by Councilmember Whalen to approve the consent calendar and seconded by Councilmember Supple. Any comments or questions from council on consent? Councilmember Supple.
I just wanted to say I was very pleased with item C with the beacon proposal. I was at a forum this weekend for the League of Women Voters, and the representative from the Met Council talked about how it is so difficult to get housing developed for people with the lowest incomes. And this is a proposal that helps to meet that very much needed thing. So I think this is really great.
Councilmember Whalen.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to take a moment to recognize the consent calendar happens very quickly in a meeting, but there's lots of really good things in here that I know take a lot of time to get to this point. And some of it gets lost in sort of the language that we use on council agendas, but this includes a new restaurant, smoother streets, new housing, new playgrounds for folks, better translation services, and then especially I'm excited about the continued focus on sustainability, the last item. Just how do we not only focus on what we can do here, but use our voice and join with other groups to push for change at other levels. So lots of good things here. Many thanks to everyone who worked on it.
Thank you, Councilmember Whalen. Other comments? Councilmember Chapman.
Councilmember Whalen put his comments very well. I agree with all of them. I was particularly interested in the new restaurant that's coming to the Richfield shops over by Target in the old Payless Shoes section. It seems like a great use for the space, and I was just curious if anybody knew anything about this restaurant. Sounds delicious, and I just wanted to highlight it.
Thank you, Councilmember Troutman. Does staff know anything about the restaurant by chance? No.
Mayor, City Council, the applicant for this request is actually on the call. I see her, so maybe she could speak to kind of the business a little bit better. But yeah, it looks great. So I'm not sure if Veronica can access. Are you
Hello, everyone.
Yep. All right.
Hello.
I can hear you.
Hello. Well, yes, as I explained before, we are doing ice cream shop, very much like Mexican traditional flavors, and we are doing it from scratch, which we are planning to use the less preservatives as we can. So we want to do as much natural as possible. And the second part will be burgers, and we want to combine our culture, like our food, with the burger, like traditional burgers from United States of America. So I am so excited too about that. And even though I already tried the burgers, I know the community will love the combination.
That's fantastic. Can we expect to have ice cream this summer, or will it be more in the fall?
We are expecting to do it this summer.
Fantastic. Well, welcome, and we wish you every success.
Thank you so much.
And we look forward to being invited.
For sure. Of course. Claro.
Gracias. Okay, any other comments from council on the consent calendar? Okay, great. Well then, we had the first, the second, and City Clerk Sitting, if you could please take the roll call vote.
Mayor Reagan-Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilmember Sapple.
Aye.
Councilmember Troutman.
Aye.
Councilmember Hayford O'Leary. Councilmember Whalen.
Aye.
Thank you. We have 5 ayes and the consent calendar has been approved. The next item, item number 4, goes to Councilmember Whalen.
Thank you, Mayor. This item will be a public hearing and a second reading of the transitory ordinance to reaffirm ward boundaries to conform to redistricting requirements pursuant to Minnesota statutes and city charter, and consideration of a resolution establishing precinct boundaries and polling locations. During the regular City Council meetings of February 22nd and March 8th, Council and staff discussed the redistricting process with regards to ward and precinct boundary shifts and the designation of polling places. The city is to equalize the population contained within the city's 3 wards. The current ward boundaries are within the recommended 5% deviation. Precincts must be fully contained within the ward boundaries. So the precinct boundaries have been modified to even out the number of registered voters per precinct and minimize the wait time for voters at the polling location. Staff used proposed population increases from future developments within the city to determine the proposed ward and precinct boundaries. Redistricting allows for the city to consider the ADA compliancy, safety, and location of polling places in order to reduce confusion of polling locations in future elections. Schools will no longer be used. School District 280 has asked the city no longer utilize schools for the 2024 presidential election and beyond. Voters that are apprehensive about entering a place of worship to vote can vote curbside at the polling location on election day or absentee vote before election day. Registered voters will receive a postcard from Hennepin County notifying them of their new polling location. Is the city must redistrict our wards and precincts by March 29th of this year. Ward and precinct boundaries and polling locations shall be effective for the conduct of the August 9th, 2022 primary election. So before we open the public hearing, would staff like to add anything more?
Not much. I don't really need to add much more. As always, I and other election staff are available for any questions that residents may have, especially regarding new precincts and changing. I did use 3 precincts that we had used in the past for the 2020 election, so tried to stay as kind of normal as possible by utilizing locations that we've already used. The biggest change would be for precinct 7. It's no longer at Hope Church. It would be at the community center, and precinct 7 is now precinct 8. So it's a little, as far as like that polling place location anyways. The numbering that I did switch up as well. I actually went through all of the maps that we ever have had, even from when we were back to our village days, and tried to figure out how they decided to number them originally and could not decipher. Even with redistricting that we did in 1982 that actually added wards into Richfield, they still did not change the way that they numbered the precincts. However, with the renumbering the way that it is now, it's more concise with what Hennepin County would like to see. With different cities, they are all numbering them in concession with their wards to make sure that they're clumped together more precisely. This helps with the absentee a lot, which Hennepin County does a vast majority of our absentee. And so that is why the renumbering happened. So residents will see a different number on their precinct, but the location would probably still be the same. But as always, residents, feel free to call me. My number is on our website. Otherwise, it is 612-861-9739. Feel free to leave me a message, give me a call. I'll get back to you as soon as I can to help find your precinct if you need. So, yeah.
Oh, yes, thank you. And yeah, want to encourage any residents listening. The goal of this is to make it more intuitive, but that change is still inevitably different. So reach out for assistance if you are struggling to figure out where you're going to be voting. At this point, I will open up the public hearing. And Assistant Wynn, could you remind us of the phone number that folks can call if they would like to comment on this?
Of course. Thank you, Councilmember Whalen. We always encourage residents to participate in our public hearings. You can call now live during the meeting at 612-861-0651 and have your comments heard by council. You can also submit comments ahead of the meeting to kwynn@richfieldmn.gov. and those comments will be read by a staff person. You can also call and leave a message at 612-861-9711 prior to meetings, and those comments will also be read by a staff person. But if you would like to participate now on the public hearing during the live meeting, you can call 612-861-0651. And I currently do not have anybody on the line.
Okay, thank you. We'll give folks a minute or so to see if anyone calls in. Assistant Wynn, do we have anyone on the line?
I did not get any callers.
Okay. Then I would make a motion to close the public hearing.
Hayford O'Leary, second.
Thank you. The motion has been made by Councilmember Whalen to close the public hearing and seconded by Councilmember Hayford O'Leary. Any comments or questions on the hearing from council? Okay. City Clerk Wynn, if you could please take the roll call vote.
Mayor Reagan-Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilmember Supple.
Aye.
Councilmember Chapman.
Aye.
Councilmember Hayford O'Leary.
Aye.
Councilmember Whalen.
Aye.
Thank you. We have 5 ayes and the hearing has been closed.
Then this, we do have 2 motions for this item. The first, I would move that we approve the second reading of the transitory ordinance establishing new ward boundaries following the 2020 census data and conforming to redistricting requirements pursuant to Minnesota statutes and city charter.
Supple, second.
Motion has been made by Councilmember Whalen and seconded by Councilmember Supple. Any comments or questions from council? Okay, City Clerk Sinning, could you please take the roll call vote?
He still needs to do the second part of that as well.
Sorry about that.
Believe we probably need to vote twice if Attorney
No.
teaching.
I don't believe so.
Mayor and council, I had sent a message to Councilmember Whalen advising that I recommended 2 separate motions since we're voting on an ordinance and then a resolution. So even though they're connected, I think it's cleaner to do 2 separate motions in this instance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, City Clerk Sinning, could you please take the roll call vote?
Not bad. Okay. Mayor Reagan-Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilmember Supple.
Aye.
Councilmember Chapman.
Aye.
Councilmember Hayford O'Leary.
Aye.
Councilmember Whalen.
Aye.
Thank you. We have 5 ayes and the motion has been approved.
And then I will make the second motion that we approve a resolution establishing new precinct boundaries and polling locations.
Councilmember Supple, I'll second.
Thank you. The motion has been made by Councilmember Whalen and seconded by Councilmember Supple. Any comments or questions from council? Councilmember Supple.
First of all, I wanted to thank City Clerk Sinning for all the work she did on this. And I was really pleased when I saw in the information that we were given that there's going to be a link on the city website for a precinct finder, and the plan for that, I thought that was really fabulous so people can look up and figure out their locations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Supple. Councilmember Hayford O'Leary.
I just wanted to compliment City Clerk Sinning, particularly in the process of anticipating future developments and thinking about how precincts would work with that. We're actively growing even more since the 2020 census, so I thought that was a really helpful process and hopefully will lead to well-balanced, convenient voting.
Thank you, Councilmember Hayford O'Leary. Other comments? I'll just follow up and say thank you so much, City Clerk Sinning. We are very fortunate to have you in leadership at the city. And this was a very complicated process that a lot of city, it's not something that a city clerk does every single day or on a regular basis, redistricting. And you just did it so well. So thank you for your leadership and thank you for getting us through this process and making it easier for our voters and our residents to participate. Any other comments? Councilmember Chapman.
I also want to thank our city clerk and just say also, it's honestly it's just a little hard and I feel a little wistful to change my polling place. I went to Sheridan Hills. My grandfather voted at Sheridan Hills. My father votes at Sheridan Hills. As long as I've lived in Richfield, that's been my polling location for all my senior residents and folks that are used to going one place. This change is done with a lot of thought and a lot of care, and our city is growing and we're responding to that. But it's okay to be wistful and remember great things that have happened in our city. But thank you for all your work on this.
Thank you, Councilmember Chapman. City Clerk Sinning, could you please take the roll call vote?
Mayor Vigan-Gonzalez?
Aye.
Councilmember Supple?
Sorry, aye.
Councilmember Chapman?
Aye.
Councilmember Hayford O'Leary?
Aye.
Councilmember Whalen?
Aye.
Thank you. We have 5 ayes and the motion has been approved. Okay. The next item we have goes to Councilmember Hayford O'Leary.
Thank you. Mayor, so I think I'll read the executive summary and then ask Mr. Swanson to read the comments. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, so this item is to consider a request for an amended plan unit development, final development plan, and conditional use permit to allow construction of a building addition to an elementary school at 6500 Nicollet Avenue South. Partnership Academy, the applicant, a preschool through grade 8 charter school, was granted land use approvals in 2018 to develop a school building at the northeast corner of the Hub Shopping Center at 6500 Nicollet Avenue South. The property is zoned PC2, Plan General Commercial. In response to enrollment and increased programmatic needs, the applicant is proposing a 5,962 square foot expansion on the north side of the building, an area of the property that is currently being used for parking. This expanded area will house 4 additional classrooms, an administrative office, student support spaces, and additional restrooms. The proposed expansion would result in the loss of 16 parking stalls, reducing the total on-site parking to 37 stalls. Enrollment is planned to total 550 students, and there will be 99 staff on site. Required parking for schools is based on the total number of staff members plus 8 spaces for visitors. Accounting for both the 5% parking reduction for bicycle parking and the 10% transit reduction, a total of 92 spaces is required for the site. The applicant has an agreement with the owner of the hub for 60 leased parking spaces, in addition to the 37 spaces that are available on the site. The current parking lease with the hub runs through January 2024. Although the city had accepted a parking lease agreement with the hub in the past, instead of shared parking covenants or easements as required by code, staff finds that further reduction of on-site parking and possible future redevelopment of the hub is suggestive of the need to obtain longer-term parking arrangements. The applicant has put in a good faith effort to secure additional parking spaces through potential acquisition of an adjacent property, either 6412 Nicollet Avenue South, currently a Leanne Chin restaurant, or 6440 Nicollet Avenue South, the Richfield Medical Building. The applicant has provided staff with possible parking scenarios on both of these properties, totaling upwards of 80 off-street parking spaces. Staff has included a stipulation in the attached resolution that one of the following must happen prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy for the new space. Those options are one of the above sites must be secured as additional parking. Option 2, additional on-site parking must be constructed. Or 3, a more permanent shared parking arrangement with an adjacent property must be provided. As a planned unit development, flexibility from provisions of the zoning code may be granted for the site in exchange for high quality design that fits into the neighborhood. In this case, the required number of on-site parking spaces is the sole provision of code that is not met. Staff recommends approval of this amended PUD request. Okay, does staff want to say anything before we hear the summary of the public comments? Nope.
Mayor, City Council members, Ryan Krzas, planner. I just want to add that staff has worked hard with the applicant to develop a flexible outcome and solution to future parking needs in a manner that's responsive to the existing policy that's on the books. I just want to add that I guess, we feel it was appropriate to address the long-term parking needs at this particular point in time because when this building was when the original building was originally built, the site had capacity to meet their code required parking needs, and this crosses the threshold to where the new addition would no longer be the case without construction of structured parking. So again, we just wanted to provide the applicant a reasonable number of options that are flexible to have something secured beyond just a lease, because I think the hub development is rather imminent, and we'd all like to see that progress. So I know a number of folks from partnership are on the line, so they can certainly answer any questions, but I'd be happy to answer any that the council has for me at this time too.
If I could just ask a clarifying question, and I've had emails back and forth with staff who've been very helpful giving the background on all of this, but I'm not sure if other council members or if it's totally clear to everyone. So just to be clear, although staff have worked to provide these three options, the request from partnership is to not do any of those and to do something different than the staff recommendation. Is that correct?
Mayor, council members, yeah, that is correct. They are asking from the letter that you all received to move forward without that need to either provide the additional property or build the structured parking at the time of occupancy as is proposed in the staff provided recommendation.
Thank you.
Other questions from council members? Otherwise, we can make the motions and then open it up for discussion as well.
Could we hear the summary of the public feedback first?
Yeah, thank you for that reminder.
Mayor, Council, I can read the summary of the public feedback if you want at this time. All right, so we received over 50 comments from both teachers and parents and prospective parents. So what I'm gonna do is just kind of read two messages from that group to kind of summarize what we heard. One is from a teacher and one is from a prospective parent. So number one teacher, her name's Claire Jordan. She's the pre-K through second grade emergent bilingual teacher. She says, "Dear Richfield City Council, my name is Claire Jordan and I worked at Partnership Academy for 3 years. I hope you will consider approving the expansion project so we can begin construction immediately. Any delay in construction will have a significant impact on being able to serve our students and the community to our highest potential." So that's a comment from the teachers. That was a pretty general statement that we heard there. And then secondly, I have one from a prospective parent. Name's Lucretia Tyus. "Good afternoon. My name is Lucretia. I'm a parent of a preschool applicant for Partnership Academy. My child is currently number 16 on the waiting list due to not having availability for preschoolers. I'm coming to you today to ask you to please approve the PA project without contingency. That way my child can begin preschool this coming fall. Thank you." So all the rest of those comments will be also included on the packet, and you have received those.
Thank you for those summaries.
Okay, I can make a motion so we can discuss the motion. I recommend we approve the attached, or I move that we approve the attached resolution authorizing an amended plan unit development, a final development plan, and a conditional use permit.
Whalen, I'll second.
Thank you. The motion has been made by Councilmember Hayford O'Leary and seconded by Councilmember Whalen. I'll open it up now for comments from or questions from council on the item. Councilmember Whalen.
I had the opportunity to speak with Lisa Hendricks, who I see is here, and I think one of the main I appreciate Councilmember Hayford O'Leary highlighting the basics of the decision we're making of whether to stick with the options provided in the staff recommendation or how that's in conflict with what the applicant would like. I was hoping that Ms. Hendricks, if you're willing, you could speak to when we spoke that you had some concerns about the practicality of any of those three options, and that is why so many of the public comments were focused on this idea of without delay. Could you speak to why pursuing any of those three options would lead to a delay?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everybody. And to answer your question, Councilmember Whalen, actually, before I do, I just want to say thank you to the members of the City Council for taking time to speak with me over the last couple of days, and also to the city staff for really working through this with us for quite a long time now. We've brainstormed lots of options, and so we wholeheartedly appreciate all that has gone into this. I think the biggest concern that we have about a couple of the options is, especially with the need to acquire an adjacent site or do the structured parking, those would, we wouldn't be able to move on either one of those rather quickly, and our financing would be contingent upon getting either of those options in place. And so although we've had really positive talks with the medical building next door, and they are, hoping to relocate in the near future, they're just not quite there yet, but it is pending and hopefully will happen in the future. So that would be a great option for us, but kind of waiting on that, we would not be able to move forward with our financing without having that kind of finalized. And then, so we would kind of just be waiting for them to go through their process, which would obviously delay construction quite a bit. The other option of having structured parking on site could work for us, and we definitely would be willing to move forward with that and invest in that. We have support from our financing team that we could acquire that additional debt for the structured parking. We would have to kind of go through, is my understanding from talking with the city team, the city staff team, that we'd have to kind of go through the process of going through the ARC and through Planning Commission and all of that, which would, and then a city council meeting on May 10th, which would put us out quite a ways. And then our closing of financing would probably happen even a month after that. So that would significantly delay our timeline. And we have a good option right now with our lease agreement with the hub that goes through 2024. And so our hope is that we don't have to prematurely take on that additional debt. And if we could just align that with the timing of when we actually would need the parking. We also understand, I think, the concerns that the city staff and others have had about that, but that is our hope, is that we would be able to move forward, because we definitely do have an option to do structured parking, but we also have a very good possibility, we believe, through our conversation with the medical group, that could, we could get to an agreement with them in the near future as well. So I think those two options would cause the delay. And then that third option of having long-term parking lease in place with an adjacent property. We have talked to a few folks in the area, and there just isn't anything other than the hub right now that seems feasible for a longer term lease. So I hope that answered the question, Councilmember Whalen.
Yes, thank you. And that's clarifying. And could staff speak to, I think, part of the concern is there have been some situations where we've had agreements with developments that have needed more parking to meet our code. There've been sort of temporary, like more formal than this, but sort of a we'll see how it goes and revisit it in a few years type agreements that have not always resolved as best as we might hope. If staff could speak to that and what might happen if there's not the recommended agreement today.
Mayor, Council. So there are a couple situations that the city has pursued previously. They both were, and I just want to first draw the distinction that those were in relation to two auto dealerships on the south side of town. Both of those situations were more so related to less mission critical aspects of their operation. And the distinction in this case would be that these parking stalls that we're discussing there's a pretty straight line as to the need of them. They would be used by staff who would be entering and exiting the building, whereas the auto dealerships were more so related to inventory and other aspects of their use. The employees had enough parking, and customers did as well. In those two cases, those applicants were given extra time, and the kind of good lessons as to the difficulties as it relates to enforcement, because things happen all the time, circumstances change, and when there's a situation where improvement gets built and there's an obligation to complete other improvements, it puts the city in a tough position to enforce on those requirements. So that in general terms is those circumstances. Melissa, did you want to add anything that kind of distinguishes those cases from this?
No, I think you generally covered it, Ryan.
Okay, then I know I've taken up a lot of time, but thank you to staff. To me, it seems, I am genuinely curious where other council members stand. To me, it seems it does come down to sort of the question that a lot of conversations have come down to, of like how okay are we with the possibility that people may end up parking on streets, which are open to parking. It's legal, but we've certainly had feedback from some residents that they don't want to see that. And so I guess I'll open it up to others to share their thoughts.
Thank you, Councilmember Hayford O'Leary.
So yeah, in response to what Councilmember Whalen said, I should maybe just want to push back slightly on the way you framed the problem, just because I do think that's an important question if we were talking about changing our parking policy, which if that were the discussion, I would absolutely say, yes, we should not have parking minimums. So as somebody who thinks that, I feel like kind of torn here, because I do think that I do see a lot of harms in us strictly imposing our minimum. Either we're putting them in a bunch more debt for this tiny impractical parking structure, or maybe even telling them to tear down an affordable commercial space and make that a surface parking lot right in the corner in our downtown. Those are bad outcomes. But they're also asking for less than half the number of spaces we currently require, and we do have some obligation to hold it to what our standard is. So I feel really torn here. Even though it has been unsuccessful in the past, I do kind of like the model that we used with Audi, which was to have financial penalties after a period of time that they have not made progress in building a ramp, or in this case, in pursuing any of the solutions. I'm not sure how that would work with the financing issue Ms. Hendricks raised, if that would still be a concern of investors. But I guess my thought is the staff recommendation, because of the situation of this site, seems like three kind of extreme options. I would love long-term for the hub options to be clearer and they can get involved with that when the hub knows exactly what they're doing, or when we as a city have that important conversation about parking and perhaps change our standards or relax our standards further. So I guess I would like to, I don't want to completely let them off the hook in terms of, I think their current ask to just take our word for it. Although I trust Ms. Hendricks' organization. Every applicant always wants the maximum amount of flexibility, and I feel like we need something given our current policy direction. But I guess I am very much open and supportive of something with a little bit more wiggle room than the staff recommendation. And for me, that would be the direction of the Audi thing. And I sort of bounced ideas off staff. They have, perfectly legitimate reasons why that's been a problem, and it may not be appropriate here. But I would suggest that we follow the Audi model with 2 years rather than 5 years before they have to return with the plan or start paying penalties.
Councilmember Chapman, did you have your hand up?
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a question for staff with regards to the recommendation, and maybe you could speak to it. I'm less concerned with the long-term parking as I am with the long-term development and redevelopment of the hub. And I was just wondering if you could speak to that. I'm concerned that what we would do now would limit or negatively impact, not necessarily whether there was parking somewhere, but whether we had the right kind of development that we wanted. And right is maybe a value. Are we preserving options for the future, or are we trading options for the future with both the staff recommendation and then the school's proposal? Could anybody speak to that?
Mayor, Council, maybe I'll just offer this. In terms of the future kind of for this area of the city, it's a high priority redevelopment area. We would want the hub to be as successful and as efficient with their land use as possible. So we wouldn't expect, nor have they necessarily expressed an interest to provide additional surplus parking beyond what just meets their needs. Definitely hear the concern about sort of what the area looks like, and I think Councilmember Hibbert O'Leary makes a great point about maintaining that street corner on kind of one of the important corners of the whole site. So, I think again, what we were trying to do is preserve options that they could pursue. And one of those options would include securing additional land. They could still continue to lease from the hub, but yet still have control to provide parking at the medical office, for example, should the need arise. So that's a scenario worth, I think, highlighting, because, I think that preserves kind of being able to meet future goals. So.
Okay. So if they did do that, so they could purchase the land now, which they're not in a position to do. They could find a lease, which they say they're not able to do. And then the purpose of and forgive me, I'm just trying to make sure I understand. The purpose of the proposal now, or the staff recommendation right now, is to comply with our parking policy, but I'm not sure. So we're complying with our parking policy, but how does that fit into what the hub will look like in 15, 20 years as it's redeveloped?
Yeah. So the intent is that the hub need not sacrifice any developable area to provide parking for a off-site location.
Okay, good. That's what I thought. I just wanted to be sure that was the case. Thank you.
So I have a couple follow-up questions after it kind of goes along a little bit where Councilmember Troutman is. So I'm hearing from staff, and it makes perfect sense that the hub development would not sacrifice any high, value priority land for parking versus, redevelopment space. That makes sense. So essentially what the hub is providing is, in the meantime, leased space for Partnership Academy parking now and into the future until, you know, that space will be redeveloped. So their plan and interest is to purchase the property next door, but the clinic is not, you know, the timing isn't right for the clinic to sell the property right now as it, you know, as it relates to the timeline that the city is on, to, you know, to say, yep, we feel comfortable because you guys have secured the clinic space. So I guess I'm interested in exploring an option like Councilmember Hayford O'Leary said. If the applicant is telling us that they have the money and are able to put the structured parking on site, is there a possibility where the timing works where we say we're going to approve them going forward and that gives them more time to work with the clinic, and if they don't do that, then they will have to do their structured parking. And I don't know how the timing of all that works, and so in terms of developing the extension of the building, but is that a possibility versus what we did with Richfield, Bloomington Honda? You know, there was a lot of years past, they didn't, versus here we have I think we might have some space. Do we have space, I guess is the question, to say you have more time, you already have committed to the structured parking, and if you don't get that structured parking secured or the additional space secured in a certain time, you have to put the structured parking. Is that a possibility in this case? Go ahead, Community Development Director Pamman.
Yes, Mayor, members of the council, that is an option that the city council could pursue. That is something very similar to what we did with the Audi dealership. And that's something that you can do again. I will just mention for transparency that there are difficulties in doing that. Those difficulties are that situations can change for the applicant, and you can put an agreement in place and say that you're going to work with us and you're going to put together a separate agreement that puts you on a timeline to either purchase or construct a parking ramp, and their situation could change and they wouldn't be able to do either of those things. And then the city is in a position where you're essentially either saying, oh, okay, it didn't work out, or you're in a position where your only option is to revoke their permit and close the school. And no one wants to be in that situation. No one wants to be in that situation for any user in Richfield. That is the problem that we have run into in these other circumstances. That doesn't mean that you can't try it again. It certainly doesn't. I just want to be transparent about what's happened in those other cases.
Thank you. Other comments or questions from council? Councilmember Supple.
I know in the past the Planning Commission has wanted us to be transparent about their discussions, and I believe it said that they didn't recommend this because of the parking. Am I correct? That is why staff came up with the 3 conditions as a way to try and reach compromise and accommodate so the development could move forward. Can staff clarify how that all evolved?
Mayor, Council, yes, the staff's recommended approval is a direct result of those conversations that we had at the Planning Commission. You know, they recognize that there's not great, abundant, readily available solutions. So again, wanting to provide flexibility that they pursue purchasing property elsewhere or pursue a more long-term agreement or come back with a structured parking request. So trying to reflect the Planning Commission's discussion with this recommendation.
So I'm struggling with this because of the fact that we want to make sure that they can go forward with their construction. I have a problem with assuming that they're going to be able to purchase land because it's a very competitive market right now, and there's bidding wars going on for both housing and for commercial real estate. So there's no guarantee that when you try to purchase that medical building, that it's somebody else isn't going to try and outbid you and go for it. So there are no guarantees that way. There's also the concern that has to do with, we want to make sure that the hub goes forward. And so there's no guarantee that you're going to be able to lease parking there as well. So that ends up coming down to like, there's only one like guaranteed solution would be that it should have to have that structured parking. And so to me, I think that realistically, that's the one thing that you could guarantee is that you could have that structured parking there. And so I don't know how much that would delay the implementation, but can you speak to that of if you go, what the timeline would be if you go forward with that structured parking?
Mayor, Council, I'm sorry, was that a question for staff? Sir, no, I think the applicant can speak to the process a little bit better.
Yeah, actually, I'm gonna let, if we could have Sean Elder jump in. He's our lead development guy from 10 Square who's been working with us on this quite closely. So Sean, you want to jump in with a few pieces of background there?
Sure. Thank you, Council, and thank you for your thoughtful consideration of the development for Partnership Academy. As it relates to the structured parking, as Ryan had mentioned, we would need to go through another public approval process for that. We're actually working on those concepts for those plans that meet the parking requirement and would need to submit that I believe next week to go through the ARC, Administrative Review Committee, the April 27th Planning Commission, and then come back to the City Council on May 10th for structured parking approval. That structured parking would then be included in the school's financing and part of their bond structure and additional indebtedness to complete that structured parking. And we would escrow those funds with the trustee and would preferably want to pursue a parallel path to if the medical clinic is able to confirm its future location, to then use those escrowed funds towards the medical clinic for surface parking. That is the preferred pathway for the school if in fact we do need to meet these initial parking requirements out of the gate. I think as Ms. Hendricks mentioned, we're trying to align the school's additional bonds and debt service for those bonds with when the parking need actually arises. And because of the unknowns with the hub, that could be January 2024 when the existing lease happens, or it could extend further, or an agreement with the hub for their future development could include parking opportunities. So I think that's the request for the school, is to align the additional funds. I'll just note with the timing of the need. I'll just note that the school, under its existing bond covenants, is allowed to take on this additional indebtedness for these purposes in the future. And so that would be the process that we would pursue if we had approval that had the contingency requirements of additional acquisition. We would also do a parallel approval for the structured parking. And the timing of that, as Ms. Hendricks mentioned, would be the May 10th City Council meeting, a likely June closing on the financing, which makes it a challenge to complete that project for the fall.
Councilmember Whalen.
I'm realizing if the applicant could clarify, I don't know which of you would prefer to speak to this, but if you did acquire the medical building, would the thought be that like the building itself would be taken down and that entire space would be used for parking? And if I'm seeing some nods, and I guess I'm just wondering, I know with staff, we've had conversations before that we don't allow surface parking as the only use for a lot. Does that change if they would be adding it onto their existing lot?
Yeah, Mayor, Council, exactly right. If they purchase that, they could combine the lots and then it would all be one lot. So it wouldn't be a standalone. It would just be part of the lot.
Okay. And I guess that to Councilmember Hayford O'Leary's point, that doesn't feel like a great use of that space either, but also I don't love the idea of a tiny parking structure. I mean, parking's just not appealing is really what it comes to. I guess my other question is, and perhaps this is me not fully understanding the escrow option that was used with the Audi dealership. Could we have a contingency that is not immediate, but is triggered by the end of their current parking lease, which is that roughly 2-year timeline? Is that what's being discussed? Or if staff could explain more of what the model used with Audi actually looked like, I would appreciate that.
Councilmember Whalen, sure. With Audi, and again, this was related to building coverage, not minimum parking requirements. So it was more a form as opposed to a need. But with Audi, the resolution that was approved by the council approved the structure with a condition that said prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy, the applicant must enter into a separate agreement with the city to detail a timeline and penalties related to the construction of the additional ramp, the additional structure. So that did happen. And that deal is still out there, that timeline, we're still working through that. We could do that with this one. We could align it. We could say about 2 years or January 2024, whatever that date was. We could have it contingent with that they need to, prior to the expiration of their lease with the hub, they need to enter into an agreement with the city to find another parking solution. And there's going to be timelines or deadlines and penalties. We could do that.
Okay, thank you for explaining that. I guess the last thing I'll share before, again, I'm curious other council members' thoughts. The more I think about this, the more I land on that it's certainly not ideal. I understand why we have parking minimums. But to me, like the absolute worst case scenario is that there's like 50 people parking on side streets for some amount of time, and there are worse things that could happen. And so I guess I recognize the inherent risks of not having more strict guidelines in place now, but I'm leaning toward having more flexibility, that the benefit of what the school is trying to offer, the benefit of being able to adapt to what else is happening in that area seems more important than avoiding people parking on the street.
Councilmember Whalen, I have a response to that. I am in agreement with you on that. The part that I'm stuck on, and if we can get clarification from staff, are we going to be able to make them build a structured parking if there's no options? That, I mean, that's to hold that, because there's a big gap. And will we be able to, whether it's, in a couple of years or whenever, can we hold the applicant to, you will have to build that structured parking. Because yeah, Councilmember Supple's right. This is a super volatile market right now, and that hubs area is just, it's really tricky. And so I am concerned about the feasibility of purchasing. And so what is the mechanism? Do we have a strong mechanism to say, all right, we haven't made it to that point, and they have access to the financing to build that structured parking? Could you, I know you talked about that, but I'm still not understanding, making sure that they do that in a future date.
Mayor Reagan Gonzalez, if you approve their addition contingent on them providing a minimum of 80 spaces, you don't have to spell out all of these options, but you have to provide, you have to say they have to at all times be able to provide a minimum of X spaces. And if at some point they come back and they cannot, you can revoke their permit. It's a very unappetizing thing to do, but you ultimately would have that authority. You could say you do not meet the conditions of your permit, you must close. You could do that.
I saw another council member's hand up. Was it Councilmember Hayford O'Leary? Go ahead.
So I generally agree with what Councilmember Whalen said. I just feel like there's so much influx with the hub. It does seem plausible to me that with a long-term contract parking customer, that a future structured parking of the hub could accommodate that customer's lease. And I would hope that would be an ideal outcome, in my opinion, of not losing the commercial space, of getting this parking. I guess it's, to me, I feel like there's both a possibility that our parking requirements could change in the next few years, and that the hub will certainly change, or hopefully will change in the next few years. And staff at least believes that within 2 years we'll have some clarity. So to me, I feeling like the only really solidly viable option, as Councilmember Supple said, the only option that's like a surefire thing before they can build would be to agree to build that ramp. I feel like I'd be betting $1.1 million of their money that both our parking requirements aren't going to change and that the hub is not going to be viable. And I don't feel like I can do that. And I also have questions about, I do feel like to some extent we were kind of lied to by the car dealerships, or that process was maybe not fully entered into in good faith. I hope that that is different here, and that this applicant has every intention of following through. The worst case scenario of doing something like Audi, and they do kind of wriggle out of it, is basically what partnership is asking us to do, which is to be approved without contingency. So I don't feel like we have, unless we are willing to bet $1.1 million of their money that they need to build a parking ramp now. I guess I don't see an alternative. At least we have a good chance that we could force compliance in 2 years, or have that extreme option that Community Development Director Paleman mentioned. So to me, a 2-year Audi-like agreement makes the most sense. And if hopefully something great happens with the hub in that time, or our parking requirements change, or something else that would cause them to come back to us, I think that's a reasonable amount of time to figure it out, and hopefully not delay their project.
Councilmember Chapman.
I just had a question about the status quo right now. If the hub for some reason, either was redeveloped or they were unable or unwilling to lease parking spaces, what would happen right now? Would their permit be in jeopardy as things stand if the leases were not renewed, or what's the current status?
Mayor, Council, can I just ask a clarifying question? Do you mean with the addition constructed, or as it?
No, I mean not. I mean like if
right
if things
now
continued as they are right now, right this second, nothing took place.
Yep. So as I mentioned, I forget what the exact number of current on-site parking stalls is, but in addition to that, their previous approvals dictated that they needed, I think it was 75 parking spaces, and they could achieve that. Unfortunately, they would have to build the spaces over the existing playground, but the original plans had that contingency in place should that lease go away.
So the contingency is lose the lease, tear down the playground.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Other comments, Councilmember Whalen.
Just a quick comment to the applicant that is probably not relevant to the conversation tonight, but I guess given the concerns about just having surface parking on that corner, just if it hasn't been considered as an option, if it does end up that you purchase the medical building site, I would hope that you could explore. I've actually know a church that did this in Dinkytown, which is a very different market, but if there could be an option that includes retaining some of it either owned or leased for your parking and still having some commercial space there or another use, that'd be worth considering.
I know this is Sean again. I know the school is always looking for additional space. I think it comes down to the ability to provide the number of parking spaces, the 80 stalls, and if the 80 stall requirement is the obligation, it's difficult to make those numbers work by keeping that structure. And if I understand it, if that site is acquired, that would just be an administrative approval of that surface parking on that site, if I'm correct on
Yep.
Councilmember Sepple.
I'd like to ask a procedural question. From what I'm hearing, one option would be to go with the staff recommendation, and another option would be to come up with some kind of a compromise, like similar to what happened with the Audi thing. If that were the case, would then this have to come back to the next meeting and it would have to all be written out, or what would be that procedure? Because it seems to me those are the two viable options at this point. I don't think we can just say, hey, you can just have it with no contingencies. So I'm just wondering what the procedural possibilities are.
Mayor and Council, I can maybe address that first, and then if Director Paleman has any other thoughts, she can weigh in as well. I think you have a couple of options. You could, right now you have a motion on the table. If there are some proposed amendments or an alternative that somebody would like to make a different motion, you can do that now if you wish to do that. If you feel as though you need more time to craft something in particular, you can give staff direction and we can come back. If there's time to do that, I guess I would look to Director Paleman and Planner Chrysos to address that, but those are my thoughts.
Mayor, members of the council, there's always a little bit of danger in crafting on the fly when these things are more complicated. I did pull up the Audi agreement or some of the language from there. I think that we could help you through that. Just based on the discussion that we've had here, and maybe this is also a question for the applicant. I do think it might be simpler to give staff direction, have us take back the resolution and bring back a clean one for you to approve, perhaps on the consent agenda even next meeting. I'm not sure what that does to partnerships timeline. That said, I do think that we could help you tonight if you feel strongly that you'd like to approve something tonight, craft that language.
Can the applicant speak to the timeline if a motion would be presented to council at the next council meeting in 2 weeks? I believe it's 2 weeks. 3 weeks?
Yeah, that was my question, is when is the next meeting? 2 weeks from tonight?
April 12th is the next meeting.
Yeah.
I think one of the questions would be the timing of the host approval for the tax exempt bonds. There's another discussion that we wanted to work through this zoning question and then have the tax exempt bonds. So if this was approved tonight, then we would pursue the host approval for the tax exempt bonds at the next meeting. Yeah.
Right, Mayor, members of the council, in regard to that, if we were to come back with a resolution on April 12th and also come with the bonds, I think those could be on the same agenda. I don't believe that would push the bonds back. I also think that what we'd be doing tonight is we'd be listening to your feedback. So Partnership Academy would have a real good idea of what that agreement's going to look like. It's just that we would be working out the details of the language, and staff would have a little more time to do that.
So it would not impact the timing on the bonds then? Okay.
That's correct.
Councilmember Hayford O'Leary.
And just to clarify, would we still make a motion or like an amendment directing staff to bring this, or are we not moving to approve it tonight then if we are directing staff to add this or change this provision?
Yes, Mayor, Councilmember Hayford O'Leary, I would suggest just making an amended motion with the new proposal to directing staff to work with the applicant and come back to council with an amended resolution for approval at the next meeting.
Okay, so if I were supportive of that, I should withdraw my original motion and just make a motion saying we direct staff to come back.
You could withdraw your original motion and just make a new motion. That works too.
So I will go ahead and do that for the sake of discussion. I withdraw my motion and I move that we direct staff at the next council meeting to provide an amended resolution that, sorry, now I gotta think what I was gonna say, that within 2 years requires them to comply with the parking options that were described, or comply with the parking requirements at that time.
I guess as the seconder of the original one, I'm okay with withdrawing it and I'll second the next motion.
Okay, so the original motion has been withdrawn. So would someone like to make, oh, you already made I guess you already amended and made the new motion. So do we need a second on the new motion? Or you're okay, Councilmember Supple, with the amendment that Councilmember Hayford O'Leary made? Okay, so the motion has been withdrawn and amended by Councilmember Hayford O'Leary. And that second motion, the amended motion, was seconded by Councilmember Supple. Any comments or questions from council on that item? Councilmember Supple, and then Councilmember Troutman following.
I just want to clarify Councilmember Hayford O'Leary's intent. So your intent is that in 2 years, they should be in compliance with whatever the parking standards are at that point. Could be one of the options that were mentioned. And then what happens if they're not?
My hope is that they will model after the Audi agreement with financial penalties after 2 years if they do not comply. I guess I just wanted some acknowledgement that it is possible, even within the last 2 years, our parking requirements have slightly gone down with the bicycle option. So I just want some allowance that if the rules change between now and then, I expect it to be the rules at the time that they comply with.
Councilmember Troutman and then Councilmember Whalen.
I would yield to Councilmember Whalen. I think he had a question related to Sean's question, or to Councilmember Hayford O'Leary's question. Mine was unrelated.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. I was just going to clarify, I've heard the word escrow used in different cases and it doesn't always mean the same thing. Is what you're describing, Councilmember Hayford O'Leary, and what was done with Audi, was there money expected and put into escrow up front, or was there a financial penalty later on if something was not done?
I believe both, but I think Community Development Director Palman could answer that better.
Councilmember Whalen, we are holding money in escrow, yes, for Audi. That was money was given up front, and that was part of a guarantee. If they do not comply we are allowed to retain that money. There's language in the agreement that allows for that. And I believe that's the way we would look at structuring this. What we would come back to you with next week, though, is a resolution directing staff to work with the city attorney, which is what we did on Audi, to work with the city attorney and Partnership Academy to craft this separate agreement that details all of those things. It details the timeline. It talks about when an escrow would be due, those types of details. We would not bring all of those details back to you for discussion.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. And I guess then I want to clarify with the applicant, does that actually solve your concerns, or does the extra money then needed for escrow cause the same problem you are trying to avoid?
It does. I think from the tax exempt bond issuance, the bondholders would need to see that the school take on the financing to complete that obligation that's identified, and there needs to be a time certain date of when those funds are used. And so if there's a date, then the school would take on that additional indebtedness. I think we would want to know that the property that we've identified at the Richfield Medical Group is listed on the host approval to allow for the tax exempt bonds to use that. So part of that host approval is allowing those proceeds to go to that property's acquisition, and we would be looking for city approval of that property acquisition as well. So if there's an obligation that's outstanding, the investors are going to want to know that that's a obligation that the school is taking on immediately.
Okay, so to make sure I understood that, you would be able in the timeline you are hoping for to just include this additional financial need to set aside for the future purchase of that property or future construction of structured parking that could be incorporated into your current timeline or would add on to it?
Well, I think we would be taking on that additional debt to build structured parking if that was an approved process. We don't have a purchase agreement in place, so that can't be a committed. The school needs to purchase that property at its closing for the new addition. So those are the two pathways. That we either would need to acquire an additional property to meet the parking obligations, or have approval to put structured parking on the site at the time of financing. I hope I'm explaining it.
Madam Mayor, if I may.
Yep, go ahead.
I think the gist of the question is, Sean, the type of agreement that we're talking about, this separate agreement that details timelines and responsibilities in the next 2 years, plus a financial escrow to guarantee compliance with that. Is that feasible for you?
I think we have to have that looked at by bond counsel, honestly. That's probably the best source to have that reviewed by. I think what I'm hearing is that there's, I think even the existing structure for the school, its past approval when it originally developed, included the possibility that if the hub parking went away, the investors knew that additional resources would need to be provided to meet that parking requirement. It just wasn't an obligation at that moment to do that. And so how we craft the language of this and when that obligation occurs would be what bond counsel would need to review. That I can't answer on the fly right now.
Councilmember Chapman.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I'm feeling, I'm just confessing, more more confused the longer that we talk about it. And if I could give my 20-second summary, you have the capacity to ask for additional capital, and that capital would either be used to acquire the building, or in the event you could not acquire the building, to build structured parking on the land you currently have. Is that correct? And that those funds would be escrowed to the city pending the resolution one way or another, and that would be part of the bond offering. Is that right? Or am I missing it?
That sounds like what was done with Audi. I think with the use of tax-exempt bond proceeds, that's another question. I think the conversation has been escrowing that with the trustee, and then having a date certain of when those funds need to be used.
Okay. Great. And you don't have to answer it now. I'm really glad. It sounds like your consensus to table it, just so we can have more clarity. That sounds great. I did have an unrelated question. If we acquire the medical center, would that be taking more commercial property off the tax rolls? And would we lose? Would that be about $20,000-$30,000 a year in revenue that we would lose as a city?
30,000.
Yeah. So that's another consideration as we think about whether or not to continue to lease other space. The correct understanding, there's just because we lease the space, the taxes still the space is we still pay taxes, commercial taxes on that space. So I just say that's not a great outcome for us either on that front.
Thank you, Councilmember Chapman. Councilmember Whalen.
Thank you, Mayor. To that last point, Councilmember Chapman, I don't think that is our decision, whether or not they purchase that. That's a private transaction. So important to consider the impact of it, but that is not our decision. I guess my concern with the new motion on the table is that it seems to have, it doesn't seem to have actually addressed the request from the applicant, and I worry. I guess I am inclined to offer even more flexibility, and take on more risk that the parking is less likely to happen, that we maybe are more likely to be stuck in that place of the nuclear option of revoking the permit or living with a non-ideal situation. But I guess it sounds like the complications of the escrow and the whether financing will be able to be put into that cause the same delays that having money set aside for structured parking would. And so I guess I'm wondering if a continuation of something more similar to what currently exists that says this is the required number of parking spaces, and if you're doing a lease for now, that's okay, but if that lease goes away, you have to figure out a different way to have that many parking spaces. I guess I wonder if that is a less complicated option that allows the applicant the flexibility they need while still requiring the amount of parking that we want and still having that same time window if the hub gets redeveloped and suddenly has a construction fence around it, and even after it's constructed does not have parking for them, that then they have to pursue a different route.
And Councilmember Whalen, I thought that was what the motion, the new motion, allowed room for that type of agreement to come back to the council. So if that's not the case, I'm understanding that no council member or maybe most council members are not okay with just fulfilling the request of the applicant and saying, agreeing with partnership has requested from us. Otherwise, someone would have put that motion out and we would have voted on it, but also don't feel comfortable with the staff recommendation, and we're looking for an alternative path that would not impact the timeline if it came back to the council at the next meeting, that could give them an extension of time and mandate that they do put structured parking if they don't meet those requirements that they need in time. That's how I had understood the second motion. I don't know if that's the case. Councilmember Hayford O'Leary.
If I could ask a question of Mr. Elder, because I'll admit I got kind of lost in your explanation. To be clear, so what's on the table is basically you would have 2 years to figure this out. Do I understand you correctly that 2 years does you no good because your investors want a clear solution today? It makes no difference if it's 2 years or 5 years or anything? Like,
I think what they are looking for is if there's an obligation to construct structured parking, then we would need to have the approval to complete structured parking.
but there wouldn't be an obligation. There would be an obligation to have a plan in 2 years to fulfill your parking requirement by acquiring another site or a structured parking or a permanent lease.
That I think we're actually getting pretty close to what the existing arrangement of the PUD is that the school has a parking requirement that is being met by the hub lease, and if that lease goes away, the school is obligated to find that additional financing solution.
Yeah, the only difference is that it provides this middle ground option where you owe the city a financial penalty based on this agreement that you would hammer out with staff, and there's an option between we ignore it and your certificate of occupancy is revoked, and that's what I'm hoping to provide. Because I think that staff is right that we're probably not going to use that nuclear option, and it's like almost not. We're not really doing that. So I guess it's just an interest having something with a little bit more teeth on it than nothing, given that the degree to which you are not complying with the parking minimum is much greater than it was the first time.
Right. And I think if there's a financial penalty, the school and the investors would model that and just say that's an unknown. We're not going to go through that penalty. We would find the long-term solution. But I think what you're describing could be very similar to the existing structure. It just provides more kind of teeth, as you put it, in the future to come up with that solution.
Yeah.
Councilmember Whalen, before Councilmember Whalen speaks, Community Development Director Palman, did you have something you wanted to add, or should I go to Councilmember Whalen?
You can move on.
Okay, go ahead, Councilmember Whalen.
I was going to clarify with Director Palman or other staff as appropriate. Is there, to me, it seems the misunderstanding is whether or not the motion on the table requires an immediate investment in an escrow fund toward parking or not. And the other clarifying question I have, do we have a mechanism for a financial penalty that is kind of this middle ground between no consequences and shutting down the school? Do we have an option for that in 2 years that is not just withholding money we already have in escrow? Like, is there a fine option? Or is the setup with Audi literally the penalty is just keeping the money we already have?
Councilmember Whalen. So what you're looking to approve right now does not include any of those details. It says that we would work out a separate agreement with the applicant to impose a timeline and quote unquote penalties. Penalties in Audi's case was an escrow that we will hold and we will draw on if you don't comply. There are other ways to do that. We'd work with City Attorney Teachin to make sure that we were allowed to do the things that we wanted to do. In this case, if partnership is moving forward with bonds and those bonds include enough money to construct a structured parking ramp, there's not a lot of need for the city to hold additional money. We know that they have the financial means to do that. So this deal wouldn't have to look like, this agreement wouldn't have to look exactly like Audi's. I think what is before you tonight is an action that says we're not comfortable leaving this just kind of up in the air. I hope you figure it out. We'd like to impose some kind of timeline so that we can keep track of this and know that you're moving forward, and that if we are hearing that the hub is moving, that we're working with you to figure out your next solution. I think it's just a more structured way to move forward. It still doesn't guarantee a solution. I don't think there is a way to do that unless you were going to require them to build the parking today.
Okay, thank you. That is very helpful and is slightly more flexibility than I had originally heard the new motion. Councilmember Hayford O'Leary, is that what you intended with the motion? And if so, that sounds like what I would support too.
Yes, that is what I intended. And as Community Development Director Pam has said, I think previously, even after we approve it in 3 weeks, if we approve that, those final details about the amount of money and how that all works will be dealt with by staff, and we trust them to figure out something that represents our direction and what works for the applicant.
Okay, additional comments or questions from council members? Okay, City Clerk Sinning, could you please take the roll call vote on the new motion?
Mayor Bacon-Gonzalez?
Aye.
Councilmember Supple?
Aye.
Councilmember Chapman?
Aye.
Councilmember Hayford O'Leary?
Aye.
Councilmember Whalen?
Aye.
Thank you. We have 5 ayes and the motion has been approved, and we look forward to connecting with the staff and the applicant at the next council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.
The next item on the agenda goes to Councilmember Supple.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This item is to consider the City Council's approval of the mayor's appointments of 2 Housing and Redevelopment Authority commissioners. On December 13th, 2011, the City Council established by resolution that the public's interest is best served by having a composition of 2 council members and 3 mayor-appointed citizens who serve on the HRA. The appointed commissioners also serve on the Economic Development Authority, or EDA. Erin Vries Daniels was appointed to a 5-year HRA term as a mayor-appointed citizen in 2017. She is seeking reappointment for her upcoming expiring term. Gordon Hanson is seeking appointment to the HRA as a mayor-appointed citizen. He would be filling an open position as a commissioner's term expired on March 20th, 2022. The HRA recently reviewed and amended their bylaws to stagger the terms of citizen members. In order to align with the amended bylaws, the expiration dates of some commissioners' current terms have been adjusted. The adjusted terms will be varying lengths, not to exceed the statutory limit of 5 years. And one other thing I wanted to add that came up during the HRA meeting is if someone is filling out a term for another person, if the term is shorter than 2.5 years or shorter than half of a term, it won't count towards term limits. But if it's more than half of a term, it will count towards the term limits. So I want to make sure that that was clarified. Did staff want to add anything to that?
Councilmember Supple, no, I don't have anything to add. Thank you.
All right, then I would move to approve the mayor's reappointment of Erin Vries Daniels as an HRA commissioner for a 4-year term expiring February 28th, 2026, and 2, appointment of Gordon Hanson as an HRA commissioner for a 2-year term expiring February 28th, 2024.
Hayford O'Leary, second.
Thank you. The motion has been made and seconded by Councilmember Hayford O'Leary. Any comments or questions from Councilmember on the item? Councilmember Sepple.
One other thing I wanted to point out is the reason there's a 2-year and a 4-year is the 2-year is because we're filling out an unexpired term, but also we're trying to get the terms staggered. So the bylaws were set up so that it would be a more orderly process in the future, because there were a number of people that resigned midterm in the past and it kind of got the staggering off. So they're trying to fix that and figure out a process to keep that more orderly. And then secondly, I'm very pleased with our applicants and I'm looking forward to working with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Sepple. Councilmember Hayford O'Leary.
So just to clarify about the terms, then going forward, they would be 5-year terms again normally, or will they continue to be a term less than 5 years?
Councilmember Hayford O'Leary, members of the council, once we get the staggering realigned, they'll go back to 5-year terms.
Okay, thanks.
Other comments or questions? Councilmember Whalen.
I was just going to add very briefly, because I know conversations have happened behind the scenes with staff and I had spoken with the mayor, but just look forward to further clarifying the process in the future. That I think we are all on the same page that the HRA and EDA is an incredibly important position and has pretty significant financial power in the city, and is just different than some of the commission appointments that are more advisory in nature. And so just look forward to that conversation to keep improving the process and making sure we're all on the same page about how it's communicated when like referrals or recommendations are appropriate, and those things. But yeah, I know that work is underway, so look forward to that before the next round.
Thank you, Councilmember Whalen. Other comments? Okay, City Clerk Sinning, could you please take the roll call vote?
Mayor Vicky-Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilmember Sepple.
Aye.
Councilmember Chapman.
Aye.
Councilmember Hayford O'Leary.
Aye.
Councilmember Whalen.
Aye.
Thank you. We have 5 ayes and the motion has been approved. Thank you. The next item goes to Councilmember Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor. The next item is to consider an appropriation of the American Rescue Plan Act funding to volunteers enlisted to assist people in Cornerstone to serve immediate housing and safety needs of community members negatively impacted by the COVID pandemic. And COVID-19 pandemic has had a negative impact on many Richfield residents, especially households with low incomes. Job losses and reduction in income have created food insecurity and housing instability, along with increased economic hardships. The community has seen increased impacts from domestic violence. Volunteers enlisted to assist people, or VEEP, and Cornerstone both provide critical services to residents in need and have capably responded to increased, sorry, my PDF just moved on me. Increased need for their services during the past 2 years. While the city provides social services funding annually to these organizations, the organizations are seeking additional funding from the city to meet the immediate housing and safety needs to residents that continue to be negatively impacted by the pandemic. The city has received approximately $3.98 million in ARPA funding. The planning for those funds is part of the broader strategic planning and budget process. However, given the more immediate needs of these organizations and the critical services and housing and personal safety that they provide, staff is recommending that some ARPA funds be allocated to VEEP and Cornerstone. Staff is recommending that the city allocate ARPA funds to 2 organizations as follows: $100,000 to VEEP for emergency rent and utility assistance to households earning less than 200% of the federal poverty line, and $20,000 to Cornerstone for violence intervention services through their criminal and civil justice intervention program. In November 2021, the council did approve $438,463 of ARPA funding to fund audiovisual upgrades to council chambers, the video control room, and other city conference rooms to better accommodate hosting meetings virtually and in person, and in combination both with hybrid meeting and both for a hybrid meeting format. The city plans to use accumulated capital funds as part of our franchise agreement with Comcast to reduce the need for ARPA funds to approximately $120,000. Therefore, the request to allocate $120,000 to Veep and Cornerstone will not increase the amount of ARPA funding that has been allocated to date. Does staff have anything to add to that?
Thank you, Councilmember Chapman. I will just reiterate that we do give both Veep and Cornerstone money through our social service grants. And in doing that this year, we just heard this incredible need from these organizations that are so important in serving our community. And so we're asking you to approve these additional funds right now so that Veep and Cornerstone can continue that great work. Tonight, Joe McDonald is here from Veep if you have questions for them, and also Courtney Poha from Cornerstone is also here.
Thank you. I think if do any of you have anything to say? Otherwise, we'll move the item. Courtney, go ahead. It looks like you're off mute, but I can't hear you.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I didn't have anything additional to share. We just appreciate the opportunity. Thanks.
Absolutely. And I'll just add, I've noticed in my law practice, just the spike in phone calls regarding domestic violence. And there was a time in relatively recent memory when we said domestic violence was a family problem. And we don't prosecute those cases because they're tough and they take additional resources. They are tough. They do take additional resources, and it's really important that we support that. When I have other comments, but I'll make the motion. But I really appreciate you folks and that you're here. So I'll move that we approve the resolution allocating $120,000 in American Rescue Plan Act funding for rent and utility assistance and violence intervention services to households negatively impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, and authorizing the mayor and city manager to execute service contract amendments with volunteers enlisted to assist people and Cornerstone to provide these services.
Councilmember Supple, I'll second that.
Thank you. The motion has been made by Councilmember Troutman and seconded by Councilmember Supple. Any comments or questions from council? Councilmember Whalen.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just say I really appreciate this use and the flexibility that staff found to do this without rearranging where things are coming from, to do this without further dipping into the ARPA funds. They are a finite resource, but as we continue into the further conversations about how we use them, I hope that we can find ways to. I know we have significant internal needs as a community that will be, or as an organization that we'll be discussing during strategic planning. And I hope that we can find further ways to invest this in the community, and that I heard a strong push from the community housing group as they discussed some of this potential that it not just be used for one-time emergency funds, but that we try and find opportunities to use this to invest in longer-term solutions for some of these recurring issues. And so I know one-time emergency use is not the only thing your two organizations do. So that wasn't my implication, but just that I hope we continue exploring more community uses and ways to invest this, even as we also need it for some of the internal things it was intended for.
Thank you, Councilmember Troutman.
I was just going to say briefly, just to Veep, and with regards to the one-time funds and just how important that is, and as people have questions, you know, why do we do this as a community? Just to lift up the fact that when people experience homelessness, it just creates a level of chaos that creates lots of other problems beyond homelessness. And so when we can stand in the gap and do that, we're making an investment in something that's really powerful and takes a lot of energy and resources and community support a lot of times to bring people back from. So I appreciate, and I know that's not the only thing that BEEP does also, but I want to lift up that good work.
Thank you, Councilmember Chapman. Other comments? I'll just add a couple. I just want to say thank you so much for being here on our call tonight, and thank you for all the work that you've been doing in our community. We are very, very fortunate to have both of your organizations and both of you leading. And Courtney, I just wanted to say hi and introduce myself. I don't think we've had the pleasure of meeting yet. And I also just want to tell you that personally, the reason that I'm in public and community service is because of how I was raised by my mother, who volunteered for over 11 years in our local shelter for victims of domestic and sexual abuse. And that really was very formative in my childhood. And I saw the importance of services that were culturally appropriate for victims in our community. And that's the foundation of me doing everything I do in my life as an adult. So it's definitely at the center of my work, and any way that our council can support both of your organizations, we constantly connect community members to you funders and lift up the work that you're doing. So anything we can do above and beyond that, please let us know. But we're very appreciative for your leadership and your service to our community.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right, City Clerk Sitting, could you please take the roll call vote?
Mayor Reagan-Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilmember Seppel.
Aye.
Councilmember Chapman.
Aye.
Councilmember Hayford O'Leary.
Aye.
Councilmember Whalen.
Aye.
Thank you. We have 5 ayes and the motion has been approved. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Have a good night. The next item is the city manager's report with City Manager Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got a short report, which is probably good news because you all have been working hard for 3 hours now. COVID continues to be and what's the word? Calm. And so our case rates are approaching the lows of the summer of 2021. So that's very good news. And we will be returning to in-person meetings as of April 1 for all of our public meetings. And that's all I have tonight, unless there's questions for me.
Any questions from council? All right, thank you, City Manager. Who would like to pass claims and payroll?
Councilmember Troutman, I would move claims and payroll.
Whalen, I'll second.
Thank you. The motion to move claims and payroll has been made by Councilmember Troutman and seconded by Councilmember Whalen. And City Clerk Sitting, could you please take the roll call vote?
Mayor Reagan-Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilmember Seppel.
Aye.
Councilmember Chapman.
Aye.
Councilmember Hayford O'Leary.
Aye.
Councilmember Whalen.
Aye.
Thank you. We have 5 ayes and claims and payroll have been approved. Last item, hats off to Hometown Hits. Councilmember Hayford O'Leary.
Sure, just 2 quick things. One, I'm hoping not taking it from Mary, but I wanted to mention Career Day at Richard High School this Friday because I signed up to be a volunteer. So I'm excited to meet with some high school students and do some mock interviews and stuff. It seems like a really cool project, and I haven't participated in the past, so I'm excited about that. I also just want to say I got a call from a constituent today. It was actually an older guy and daughter, multi-generational household. They both had complaints, and they were kind of a different political or background or different priorities about the city. But it was just like it's really nice to have a respectful conversation when people disagree and you kind of work on your disagreements and you don't necessarily change each other's mind. But it was just like a really nice, productive conversation. The type of which I hope as COVID continues to recede, I get to have more of just good talking about city issues, because it is really nice to be able to hear those things from residents and share different perspectives.
Thank you, Councilmember Whalen.
Just a quick one. My brother and 2 nephews came to visit this weekend. Had a chance. They're 2 and 4. Got to go check out the adventure park, and they gave it a hearty thumbs up. So just another shout out to everyone who worked on making that possible. Not surprisingly, with how nice it was this weekend, one of the first nicer spring weekends, it was very busy, as I'm sure most of the playgrounds were. So many thanks to everyone who helped get it in there and who helped maintain it.
Thank you, Councilmember Supple.
Thank you. I want to do a shout out to our communications team for the excellent job they did on the Richfield annual report that came out. So thank you, communications team. And I also want to do a shout out to the community development staff. Last night was one of my favorite HRE meetings of the year because they did the annual year in review report and they talk about all the things that the Economic Development Authority does and the Housing Redevelopment Authority. And they told the stories of how it helped people and how it impacted people. So I would highly encourage you all to go to the city website. And if you go under city government, you can go to either HRA or EDA. And you can look at that year in review because it was just something that made you feel good about the positive changes that were happening and how local government can work to make people's lives better. Thank you.
Absolutely. Councilmember Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciated talking with folks from Partnership Academy, and I know that everybody who I know who attends there, it has their students there, had such an incredible experience. And I'm just reminded by volunteers that were here advocating for their school and with Veep and in Cornerstone. I'm just so humbled and I'm so encouraged, and people don't appreciate how many tens of thousands of volunteer hours it takes to make a city like Richfield an incredible place to live. So hats off to everybody doing incredible things because they believe in our city. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Troutman. I'll just echo a couple of things that I heard already, but I just love the year in review for the HRA and the EDA. It's just so exciting and inspiring to see how we can really make huge impacts in affordable housing and make improvements in the lives of our community members and be innovative and creative in the process and work together across our community. And then Councilmember Supple did highlight the annual report from the city, from the city, but also like 3 whole different items that just came in the mail. So we have the community education and also recreation services program for the spring and the summer. I signed up, I think, for at least 2 different classes. One of them is just getting tips and ideas for your kitchen remodel. Hopefully we'll be remodeling our kitchen. So there's an awesome class on that. There's all kinds of amazing classes. So please check them out for all ages. And there's also several offerings in Spanish as well, so that our Spanish speaking community members can read the program as well. But there's even like how to make tamales, and I think that one already has a wait list, and there's all kinds of cool stuff. So check it out and share with your friends and family. But seeing as we have no other business, I will adjourn our meeting. Thank you, everyone.